friends. Welcome to the podcast or the YouTube channel, whichever you're watching Wonder in the Weeds on. I apologize in advance if you're watching for my appearance, as I am freshly post-workout, early morning, no makeup, full glory. Here you got me. And the reason for that is because this next episode is actually part one of 2 episodes. I started recording to tell you a little bit about my health journey and talk about it in the context of women's health and what's going on in the world these days. And I yammered for so long, we decided to cut it into 2 because nobody has the kind of time to sit around and listen to that. So for part 1, you're going to hear a little bit about how I got here. You know, the last maybe 10 years or so of being a woman in the medical world and feeling not like yourself, but maybe sometimes being ignored or just having people not really care to find a solution for you. So that's part 1. And then join me next week for part 2, where we talk about how I got to where I am today, post-workout in full, exercising as a regular part of my life, feeling great most of the time, loving my life and my body. So stay tuned. And here we go for part 1. I'm here to talk about health, women's health, but specifically really just kind of share my story a little. And then I hope to do some more episodes about women's health, especially in midlife. But my story starts a long time before midlife. So with some experts and panelists and people who can give you much more of like the actual medical science behind it. So we're just going to start today with my story because that's what I know. So for those of you who don't know, I just recently turned 52. And this story of mine starts about 10 years ago, actually, probably almost exactly 10 years ago, around 2014 or 15. I went back to graduate school. I was working full time and in graduate school, and you know, so not very healthy because in graduate school and working full time doesn't leave a whole lot, and having 3 small children doesn't leave a whole lot of time for anything else. And I'm not somebody who has ever really loved like the gym. I went to the gym because I was supposed to go to the gym, but I never have, since playing sports, have never been a person who loved working out. So actually, this starts a little bit before them. 16 years ago, I got a certificate of from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I got a certificate in holistic, what's it called? Holistic health coaching is what it was called. You know, it was a certified program. They went through the same group that certifies like chiropractors and things like that. And essentially, the education portion of it was like 1.5 years of classes on like every different theoretical diet and nutrition idea from like forever. Like, you know, we talked about a paleo diet. We talked about all different like the zone and heart health and the China study and like a million things that really gave this sort of broad overview of how to embrace healthy eating without subscribing to like one way of doing it and without getting it. And like it also incorporated a lot of coaching and mental health stuff into it. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because it wasn't like what you see now on the internet. It wasn't this is the cure to everything that's ever been wrong with you. It was a much more broad overview of nutrition and health and the correlation between nutrition, mental health, and physical health. And then sometimes people took that little education of ours and went a little crazy in a different direction and got a little extreme and decided one thing was the way to go. And I had lots of friends that I graduated with that went into like the supplement route and the working for this MLM route, and it got a little messy. So I only worked as a holistic health coach for like maybe 1 or 2 years, to probably 2 or 3 years. And mostly what I did was I worked with women who were weight loss surgery, and they needed, some sort of like nutritional counseling, pre or post. Sometimes I had post people too. And I worked with a friend who was a mental health therapist who was like, hey, they need this like other piece to it. So help them sort of with the lifestyle portion of the weight loss. So I'm telling you all this to tell you, I've always sort of had a very curious relationship with food and diet and wellness and that kind of thing. I have definitely had moments of extreme thinking where, I didn't use any like dryer sheets and my kids didn't have fluoride in their toothpaste and all of the things that, you now see still probably. I used cloth diapers for a long time. I used non-chemical sunscreen, only zinc oxide, like all of those types of things. I had I'm just going to be real honest with you. I had a flexible schedule for my kids' vaccinations. Not my first one. My first one, I just did everything they told me to do. But my second two, I had a flexible schedule for their vaccinations. They got every single vaccination except for one because it was new when they were little, the HPV one. They've since gotten it. Like my younger ones got it. But in the beginning, I was a little skeptical of HPV vaccination. Anyway, this is just a lot of information to tell you that I have been down the rabbit hole of sort of the wellness, whatever grift, if you will, and always sort of stop short of the grift part of being like, ooh, this feels a little extreme or this feels a little whatever. And I definitely embrace the sort of personal responsibility angle of that. Meaning, if I gained weight, if I was out of shape, if I wasn't feeling well, if something wasn't working, I always looked at, well, what am I doing? How can I change that? What's my diet? How do I exercise more? It was always about like, oh, clearly I'm not doing something right because my body's optimized to work perfectly. And so it must be me. That's why I'm telling you all this, to tell you that that's sort of where my head was. So 10 years ago, I am in my early 40s. And actually a little bit before that, like my late 30s, I started having a lot of gynecological problems that, they were painful. They were inconvenient. They were all of the things. I was done having kids at that point, and the doctors that I went to, multiple doctors, and often they would just put me on birth control pills, and that would actually relieve some of the symptoms for a while, but it never lasted very long. And so then I had like a procedure done that worked for like a few months, and then in my 40s, they started talking about hysterectomy, but I was really still in my early 40s, and that didn't seem to be, I wasn't ready for that yet. It felt like very extreme. Like there's nothing else you can do to help me besides take out all of my organs. And so I looked at alternatives, and I took supplements, and I worked out in different ways, and I ate strange things. And I ate a lot of different foods that were supposed to help me with that kind of stuff. And I'll be honest, and sometimes it worked. And in this time, I discovered spin class at a local place that I absolutely fell in love with. And I was training to be a yoga teacher. So I was going from spin to yoga 3 to 6 days a week. And at that point, probably lost about 30 pounds. I wouldn't have even called myself overweight. I was just sort of in that, like, once you've had kids and your body starts to turn into middle age, you get like soft is how I would describe myself at that point. And so in my early 40s, in about 2014, it started. And by like 2016, it was sort of peak. I was in like peak physical condition, I would say. I had just finished yoga teacher training. I was working out like 6 days a week. And I had lost probably 30 pounds. I was in pretty great shape. I was like, oh, okay, great. This is what your 40s are for, right? You're supposed to get like, I thought like, I'm going to get like muscly in my 40s. And then I can like relax a little bit in my 50s and just like go for walks and be sweet and gentle to myself. So I was like pounding it out in the spin studio and then going straight to yoga class a bunch of days a week. And that lasted through in mid 2016, I started working full time as because in between there, I was working full time. I quit that job so that I could do my internship for graduate school, which was basically a part-time job. It was like 20 to 30 hours a week. And so I was able to, I was at the gym every single day those days, the spin studio or the yoga studio. And then in the yoga studio, yoga teacher training, you're there for like 8 hours, 2 days a week on the weekends. And half of that is taking class. So like it was a lot of physical movement. And also my yoga teacher training was so great and wonderful and robust. We learned, I was like a vegan for a year and really ate like nothing but super healthy, like freshly grown stuff. No dairy, I did the whole 9 yards. And then in 2016, I got a full-time job. Finally, I finished graduate school and got a full-time job. And so had a lot less time to do all of those things. I had a lot less time to sort of dedicate to, my physical self. And started to gain a little bit of weight, but that wasn't really so much the problem. The gynecological issues, let's be honest, I was bleeding like nonstop. Started back up again. And so then I was back to doctors again. First, I tried all the supplements and all the things and talked to my yoga teacher and asked her if she knew of anything and tried essential oils and tinctures and salves and all of the things. And then finally went to another doctor. She told me that, I don't want to throw these doctors under the bus, but like it was so disappointing when it was women specifically because they were just as dismissive as the men. And I thought, how can you feel this way? Like, how can you not want to solve this problem? Or at the very least, how has there not been another woman in here who is having these same problems? So it started out with just really heavy bleeding, but then it became like I was anemic and therefore I had zero energy. So then we're not working at all. So then I started gaining weight. And then even when I was doing everything right, I wasn't losing any weight. And so my joints started hurting and I was constantly swollen. I was like, I had edema from like the knee down. My legs and feet were like gigantic. And this just went on for like 10 years, honestly, from like 26 to, well, that's not true. So from age 42 to age 40, I think I had my surgery at 48. It was during COVID. So all this is going on. I'm going to doctors. They don't know what's wrong. They'll put me on a birth control pill. They'll take me off a birth control pill, but they put me on the birth control pill that's like, you only get a period once every 3 months. I would do that. It would be awful. They would be like, okay, so don't stop taking it at all. Like basically try to trick your body into not having a period at all. Well, that worked for maybe like 3 months. And then, my body didn't respond. I had all these tests, all of these scans, and they would say, we don't see anything. There's no endometriosis. We don't see any endometriosis. We don't see any fibroids. We don't see anything. However, they almost never could see my right ovary. They would be like, well, we couldn't see it during the scan. And I'd be like, okay, well, that seems like it's a problem. Like, what do you mean you can't see it? And then there was a time, and my family like laughs now, we joke now, but it's a joke now because I feel better. But there was a time where literally all I ate was ice chips and pickles. I would order pickles. Like this was during COVID. So I was doing delivery groceries for the first time ever. And there are these little, I can tell you exactly what they are. The memory's so burned in my brain. Vlasic, I think they're called mini snackers or snackums, something like that. They're like small pickles. And I would order them 2 jars at a time weekly. And I can remember at one point panicking because they were out of them. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, and I don't know why other pickles didn't work. It was like the salt content wasn't the same or something, or I couldn't like throw them in my mouth really quickly the same way in between clients or whatever. But I was so horribly anemic that all that I wanted was salt and water. Like, that's it. And so I'm just telling you that to illustrate how bad it got for a while. I was, I don't know, let's say 80 pounds heavier than I'd ever been in my entire life. Like heavier than I was when I was pregnant with any one of my children. I had never gained that much weight. And I didn't understand why. They were telling me there was nothing wrong with me other than I was literally unable to leave my house because I was bleeding so much. It was like having a miscarriage every day. And, I hate to say this, but luckily it was during COVID. So we were trapped in our houses anyway, and I could work from my desk. So like, I just, in between every session, went and changed my pants every time. And had all of the different female hygiene products on, but would every hour have to change them all because I would leak through them all. So hence the anemia. And I remember going to my GP at this time too, for just a regular physical. And but also complaining to him because of all of my doctors, he was my favorite because he would sort of look at the holistic picture of it and be like, I understand you're upset about gaining weight. Have you tried this or have you tried this? And he also knew that yes, I probably have tried that. Like I'm pretty good about understanding, like you can't eat, ice cream every day and expect to be okay. Like I have a pretty healthy diet and I drink enough water and I eat vegetables and all the things. So I went to him during all this, like, well, maybe he can help me because nobody else is helping me. And I remember he came in after my blood work alarmed at the level of hemoglobin. He was like, you should be in the hospital. Like, this isn't a normal level. Like, how are you functioning on a day-to-day basis with your hemoglobin this low? And I was like, I don't know. And then he said, I need you to go for like other tests. And I said, well, my gynecologist, and he was like, oh, you're having gynecological problems? And I was like, yes. And he goes, okay, that explains it then. He was thinking I had cancer or something else, but he was like, oh, well, if you're, if what you're telling me is true about your body, well, then that explains the hemoglobin, but you need to get this taken care of. And I was like, I agree, but nobody seems to want to be taking care of it for me. So he was like, I think I had an appointment to see them. He was like, go see them. If nothing happens at that appointment, please come back to me and we're going to pursue this, the two of us, because you can't go on like this. So that was at least encouraging that he felt like he was going to help me. But I did want to be like, how come you haven't, like, how come all the other times I've come in here, you've just been like, well, you need to lose a little weight. Like it took my hemoglobin being at dangerously low levels for anyone to say, oh, I guess we have to do something about this. And honestly, the hemoglobin levels were so low I had gone to the ER at one point because I thought I was dying, because when your hemoglobin dips like that, you think you're like something, my body is not working properly. Something's wrong with me. I'd gone to the ER. They sent me back to my gynecologist. That I went to him for just a regular checkup and had another batch of blood work done. And that's when everybody was like, okay, something has to be done. Also at that point, I was done. I was finished trying to find a solution. So I agreed to a hysterectomy because I was like, well, if nothing else is going to happen and nobody else seems to have a solution for the bleeding issues. And also I've now gained 80 pounds. And at this point I was going to the gym 4 times a week. I was eating really healthy. I mean, no longer pickles and ice cubes, but not a lot, because I never felt very well. So I would eat like a little bit of it, like an egg in the morning and then some salad, and then we'd have dinner. And, like I wasn't eating too much sugar. I wasn't eating whatever. And the alarming part of all of this, and the part that like still to this day makes me so angry, and I see it in other women and it makes me even more angry, is that I was so hateful toward myself in this moment. I was so just disgusted with the way that I looked and with the idea that clearly I was doing something wrong, because all of these doctors were telling me that there was nothing that was wrong with me, quote unquote, wrong with me, other than my hemoglobin was too low, which supposedly was due to the fact that I was bleeding. But nobody could really tell me why I was bleeding, because supposedly there was no fibroids and there was no endometriosis. Everybody kept saying that over and over and over again. We don't see any endometrial tissue. We don't see any fibroids. I don't know why this is happening. Take this pill, whatever. So I thought, well, it must be me. Either this is just my genetics. Like, I guess when you get to a certain age in my family, you just get fat and sore and old and everything hurts. Like I had myself at like 95 years old at 48. Like I really thought, like, I guess this is it for me. I'm just going to feel miserable all the time. And I'm not going to be able to like enjoy my life because I didn't earn it or something. Like, I don't really know, but I just know that I was really mad at myself and really like disgusted with myself. Like I was doing something wrong. And really what happened, so I had this hysterectomy and I kind of thought, okay, great, everything's going to be better once I have this hysterectomy. And it wasn't. Shocker of all shockers. So first of all, I was kind of misinformed that when you have a partial hysterectomy, which is what I have, I had everything removed but my ovaries, because my understanding was if you keep your ovaries, then you don't go right into menopause, because your ovaries are the parts that produce the hormones that you need to stay out of menopause for a little longer. And by menopause, I mean the dip in estrogen and progesterone that comes from menopause. I thought, well, if I keep my ovaries, then I'll be able to like skirt around that. I will stop bleeding because I won't have a uterus anymore, but I will not be pushed into early menopause. No hot flashes, no whatever. Meanwhile, alongside all this, I start to have like a handful of clients that are going through menopause. And so I'm seeing firsthand what they are experiencing. And, the lack of support they had also. So like they're trying St. John's wort and they're trying all these different things and they're doing all this stuff to stop, sweating and being mad at everybody and hating everybody. And I'm watching that and being like, oh, I don't know that that's not happening to me. Like they said I wasn't going to go into menopause and that wasn't going to happen. So I have the hysterectomy. I keep my ovaries. I'm very nervous about the hysterectomy in general because I have this family history of cancer and I'm afraid they're going to see something or they're going to have something and I'm going to get it somewhere else, whatever. Anyway, I'm very anxious, but I have it. It goes fine. I actually adored my surgeon. I feel like she's the first person that I had met in this entire journey who actually cared about me and had honest information for me. She comes out of surgery. I go to my follow-up appointment. She comes out of surgery. She goes, you had so much endometrial tissue in there. It was hard to get through. And you had a fibroid the size of I think an orange inside that looked that you essentially were 3 months pregnant. Your body was acting as if it was in its first trimester of pregnancy. So I was holding on to weight. I couldn't, use the bathroom properly. My digestion was all off. Like everything inside my body was swollen, for lack of a better word, was inflamed and swollen, which had all the other stuff was going on. That's why my legs were swollen. That's why, I remember waking up from surgery, no joke. Like I wasn't in the hospital waking up from surgery. It was back at the house. So it was like the next day waking up from surgery, looking down at my feet and crying because I was like, this is the first time in about 6 years where I have seen my feet. Like they're not just swollen, puffy things at the end of my legs. They're like my actual veiny, bony feet. I have very bony, veiny feet. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know I was going to be able to see this again. So I thought, great, this is the answer to all of my prayers. I have had this hysterectomy. I'm going to be able to like live my life again without having to worry about being 2 feet from a bathroom at all times. I'm going to save hundreds of dollars a month on feminine hygiene products. I'm going to get back to it and start living my life again. And in a lot of ways that happened. I was able to go back to the gym. I was working out, 3 to 4 times a week. I was doing gentle stuff in the beginning. Like I started a Pilates. I started with a personal trainer who I knew would sort of take care of me. And like, she knew where I had come from and everything. And then I was working with a Pilates instructor who, same thing. I was like, look, I'm, 80 pounds overweight and I'm post-surgery and I need to sort of get my life back. But here's who I used to be. Like I used to be this athlete that could do a lot of, like anything that you threw at me, I could do. And I did that for, 6 months, 8 months. I don't think I think maybe I lost I don't know. I didn't lose a lot of weight. And I also didn't, the water retention and stuff, it went away, but not completely. They sort of swelled back up again. And I still had some stuff that wasn't going correctly and all of these things. So the surgery was the answer to a lot of problems. It was not the answer to all of the problems. And I still had doctors who were like, welp, move more, eat less. It's because it's because you're fat. All of these things are happening to you because you're fat. Great, thanks. I know I'm fat. That's why I'm coming. I'm telling you, like, I'm not doing anything that would lead to this. Like, I'm not eating. I'm not overeating. I'm exercising more frequently than I have in years. Like, I don't understand what's going on. And they would just be like, well, you're overweight, so things happen. Basically, sort of like you're old and fat. And so this is just how it's going to be. Now, the one saving grace of this moment was that I started to feel a little bit better because I could do more things. I was being able to do more things at the gym. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to accept that this is the way that I look because I can move my body and I feel way better than I have in a really long time. So that part at least felt like, okay, well, I'm getting some of my life back a little.